Entitled mother tried to take my friend's truck and stabbed him with a pocket knife when told no. So the cops took her away screaming and locked her in the facility where she belongs. Plus all updates. For starters, my friend owns a blue '05 Dodge Ram 1500. It's not the most reliable model of truck, but he's kept it in good shape and left it looking stock, save for some aftermarket alloy wheels. He tells me he was willed the truck from his grandfather when he passed away 7 years ago. Caleb isn't a mechanic but learned how to do a lot of work on this truck himself. I even helped him redo the undercoating and buff polish the paint. This story takes place around 3 years ago. My friend tells me this was the only time he's dealt with an entitled parent. He described her as looking like a teapot, short and stout. So from this point on, the EM will be referred to as Teapot. For the sake of giving him a name, my friend in this story will be referred to as Caleb. Rewind 3 years and our story began at a local supermarket whose name rhymes with Stallmart. Caleb always goes out of his way to try and get as close to a parking space to the store as possible. And on this day, he managed to do so. He went in and did the bulk of his food shopping for the next couple of weeks, and everything seemed fine. But of course, now comes the enter Karen part of this story. Caleb was pushing his cart out when he saw an older woman trying to force open the rear door of the canopy on his truck. This is odd because you could see inside that he didn't really have anything of value in it other than a few tools. She didn't seem to notice him until he was super close and said to her, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Teapot jumped back like lightning struck, but then quickly started playing the little old lady card. Though this woman was about 50 tops, she put her hand over her heart and said in an over-exaggerated way, "Oh dear, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that, young man." Caleb said, "Yeah, sure, what are you doing?" Teapot, "I was just trying to get in my truck. I locked my keys inside by mistake and can't get in." Caleb, "Lady, that's not your truck." Teapot, "Yes, it is. I just got it last year." Caleb told her, "Oh really? Then what model year is it?" And she answered, "It's 2010. Just look at how clean and new it looks." Caleb, "No, lady, it's an '05. I know this because it's my truck." Caleb then produced the keys and pressed the button on the fob to unlock the door. He said Teapot first went white, then red with anger. After this, it's pretty much stereotypical Karen. "Teapot, listen here, you little poop. You don't deserve a truck this nice. It'd be a lot better for someone like my son. He's a local college student, you know, and he needs a nice shiny vehicle like this to get around in." "Caleb, are you loopy, lady? My truck isn't for sale, and even if it was, how much would you give me for it?" Teapot started to look smug and pulled a checkbook from her purse. "I can give you $1,500 for it right now." Caleb facepalmed so hard he said he hurt his nose. "Lady, my truck is worth several times that, and I've personally kept up with its maintenance for several years. There's no way in hell I'd take $1,500 for it. Plus, there's no way I'd hand over the title unless I were paid with cash. I don't trust checks." Teapot moved to get up in his face, which was funny because he was a full foot taller than her. She was about to speak when Caleb silenced her with a loud, "Don't even think about it, lady. My truck isn't yours for the taking. It never will be. Now leave me alone so I can unload my groceries in peace and go home." He then did his best to try and ignore Teapot as she began screaming and saying she'd call the police. Caleb then just yelled back, "Call them then." And she actually did. She pulled out an old flip phone and began fake crying while speaking with a person on the other end. Caleb finished loading his groceries and locked the truck because he wasn't about to drive off with the police on their way. When the police arrived, Teapot actually flopped down onto the ground and started fake crying like a baby while flailing her arms and legs around and pointing at Caleb, screaming he knocked me to the ground and stole my truck. And then he said he'd come back later and hurt my family. "Arrest him now." The two police officers that had shown up were an older man with a mustache and a younger one that Caleb said he guessed was a rookie because the younger cop was immediately getting ready to aim his taser when the older one stopped him so they could assess the situation first. Caleb raised both hands and calmly stated that nothing Teapot said was true, and that she'd been harassing him since he caught her trying to break into his truck. Teapot, while still having a tantrum on the ground, yelled, "He's lying. Arrest him." The rookie officer spoke with Teapot while the mustache one spoke with Caleb. Since he was so close to the store, Caleb stated that he bet that the security cameras picked up the whole thing. At that point, Teapot gave up on her act and started screaming like a banshee while running at Caleb with a small pocket knife she'd pulled from her purse. Caleb tried to back away and held his hands up, and the knife went right through his left palm, which he described to me as one of the most painful things he'd ever felt. She pulled the knife out and tried to stab him again when the rookie tackled her to the ground and tased her. Teapot flailed around and started screaming and sobbing like a baby. When she finally stopped moving, the mustached officer cuffed her while the rookie called for an ambulance. Teapot was loaded into the police cruiser, kicking and screaming, "Help! Police brutality! Someone help me!" Caleb was taken to the hospital to tend to the stab wound in his hand. It turns out he was incredibly lucky as the knife had gone right between the bones and not damaged any tendons. Later in court, Teapot actually tried to plead not guilty, but the evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was charged with attempted murder, attempted grand theft auto, and a few other things. The judge sentenced her to be put in a mental facility because she clearly was not well. As soon as that happened, Teapot flipped out and began trying to charge at the judge, but the guards quickly grabbed her and hauled her out of the courtroom. Also, during the trial, Caleb met Teapot's son. Turns out he'd gone no contact with her as soon as he was old enough to move out because she was the most controlling and overbearing mother you could imagine. And ever since then, she'd been trying to show up at his apartment and bring him nice things he suspected she'd stolen just to try and get him to talk to her. Guess she figured Caleb's truck would have gotten her back in her son's good graces. Caleb decided to check up on Teapot by searching her name online. She's still at the mental facility and he found out from her son through social media that she looks to likely be staying there for quite some time to come.